come on in.
Daniel, is the number of people correct? 1,041?
I'm not going to tell you yes or no. You just have to give me your answer.
I don't know.
And I'll award those I award.
Oh, okay.
Because if I say someone's right, then the next guy's just going to say that. You get it?
I woke up this morning.
Like if the first guy just says it's 200, and I'm like, yeah, you got it. And the next guy's like, it's 200.
I have screen time. I don't choose to have it. My mom. So my
Alrighty.
phone shuts off at 1 a.m.
Everybody grab a chair.
At 8.
We're going to play a game.
I wake up at 6 in the morning. I can only play one. I sleep till this end. What? And that's what I do. But I do. Yeah.
Wait, do you want to be on my team?
Michael Wazowski.
Kovacs, feel free to also grab chairs. Just because you're auditing doesn't mean you have to stand.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Good job, Micah. How did you get my number, Micah? Micah got my number. How did you get it?
Yeah, so quickly too.
Danielle? So quickly, I do. Look, and you got my number and texted me your Among Us count has been disabled. I have Among Us.
It was.
Among Us is fun.
Among Us is fun.
Oh.
I prefer the
Why so many red chairs?
Say what?
I prefer the mushroom themed version.
What is that? I like that.
A fungus?
Fungus Among Us. Those are actually Pokemon.
Oh my god, Kira.
I like investigation games.
Oh my god.
What?
I like them because
Because he sauce. Why is the chair up?
You and the chair.
The chair wasn't there.
Bro, Mafia is so fun.
Mafia is. Mafia is like killer version. It's like in person Among Us.
I literally woke up to a text and it was from you, Alan.
They probably based the game Mafia off of Among Us.
I don't know if I'm coming to church, Alan.
Well, I texted you.
No, I know. And then I texted you, yeah.
Your sister's.
I texted you because sometimes, like when your mom wakes up and she's like, I have a headache.
Yeah, and then
So then I
she wakes
texted
up
you.
the second my mom says, oh yeah, I'm not going. Maya's like, no, I actually don't feel good. And Logan's like already there. He's just like, thanks, Maya.
Yeah.
She tells us like 30, she tells us after Danielle gets ready and puts all her makeup on. It's like Danielle's all upset and stuff. I don't have to
Go tell
get
Judah.
She spent like 50 hours getting her makeup on.
Judah.
Bro, like, I don't know how long my sisters take because they got their own room. Elena will just do lipstick and then brush her hair.
Alright guys, that is plenty of chairs. We don't have that many humans today.
Are you sure?
Yep.
15, 16,
Alright.
17.
Everybody come on in, grab a seat. We gotta play a game. We gotta start soon.
I got excited.
The first charge.
You want some red?
Why'd you grab
Victoria, put this knowledge in your head. Put this knowledge in your head. No. Okay. I'm also very tired. Right? I hate when that.
It hurts like
I hate when that happens. It goes so bad.
bottom rib. It hurts so much.
It's so painful. Hey, my dad, I have so
Honestly,
my back hurts, okay? I slept, okay?
I slept. Bro,
I have 3.
bro, the other day, last night, Alonzo was so tired, he fell asleep like this. I was like, what are you doing?
What was he doing when he
He's
fell
like
asleep?
Logan,
this.
you're the one who wakes up and you can't move your arms because you
Well,
slept
because
like
I woke up and my arm was like this.
Okay,
so then I
he sleeps
moved it.
and
I
I've
could
fallen
not feel
asleep
it.
literally like this on the couch. Let's go.
One
I've done that
time,
so many times and my cat scratches me.
I fell asleep on the top part of the couch. Because sometimes if I can't sleep, I'll just sleep on the couch.
I do that sometimes. Or I sleep with my head like
standing up with my
and then
head leaning onto a gun.
It's really weird.
That's weird. Cause
I've changed it.
it's just a change.
Yeah, and then it just
Like there was like
sleep. It's nice.
there was like a week I woke up every time at 2 a.m. and then fell asleep on the couch.
I fall asleep in the car in the most uncomfortable position.
I cannot fall asleep in the car or
I can't either.
Like I just can't. I can't. Like it doesn't work with me. So like Danielle's just sitting next to me, just like sleeping. I'm just like he's like I can't sleep.
Control of your feet sometimes, and I'll like go against your other hand or like try to choke you.
My dad, when we were little, we like started driving at like 2 a.m. for Disneyland, so then we're like there at like noon, and I would not fall asleep the whole time. I would just.
I don't fall asleep in cars or planes. When you asked me what one of my pet peeves was, I really wanted to say you, and then be like, I'm joking, it's okay, Alan.
And then
But I didn't, and then you're like, oh, I know, Alonzo. And I was like, yes.
Still don't know who
I don't know him either.
It's like this.
Alonzo is like,
My dad.
your dad. Alonzo's your
Alonzo
my
is your
dad.
dad. Yeah.
My dad the other day, he's like, I need new walking shoes from Big Dick's. He accidentally mixed up Big 5 and Dick's Sporting Goods, so he said Big Dick's.
Listen,
It tastes pretty good.
for one, why do you feel the need to share that?
Because it's funny.
For two,
That's its fun.
well, there's only a certain amount of sports stores that
Yeah.
get mixed up.
It's hard.
What do you mean they're great against Sports, Big 5, Dick's Sporting
You're
Goods,
gonna name
Men's
like
Warehouse?
50 storehouse.
That's why I just said. Whatever.
Two
That
places.
Alan?
I always thought they were the same.
No.
Micah, toss me a Bible.
Yeah, talk to my.
All right, guys, I need teams. Two
Me
teams.
and you, Abby.
Team this half, team that half.
Me and you, Abby.
Go ahead and scoot down at this place. I have forgotten your name. Hunter. I know we've met at least twice. Sorry, my name's Daniel. Alright,
Tell Hunter
1,
his
2,
name.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10,
I know what you're.
and 11. Alright, so team of 5 or 6, kind of your choice where you guys want to split it, because there's an odd number of you. No, we're just doing 2 teams. This game is based on teamwork, and the more excellent your teamwork looks visually, then the better it's gonna go. And if there's only 2 of you, you're gonna fail. You're gonna lose hard. It's gonna be awful. All right, real fast before we start, I just need you guys to have the right idea in your head.
Daniel, I don't
Yes.
know what we're doing. My dad said yes.
I'm ready for this.
Look at this. Yes.
She says Daniel. Who's
Can I go to main service? This is Danny. Yes.
Sorry, I can't talk about it. How do I know it's your dad? It's in your contacts as Danny's.
Danny's dad.
Danny's dad.
Wait, your dad is in your phone as Danny's dad?
No, this is my phone.
Then that means you have
Like
to
Maya,
keep it.
like the thing. No, but I said this is Danny. Yeah.
Out. I think I have.
Alright, bye Danny, I love you.
I used to
Don't distract Aiden, Danny. Or Judah.
the photo.
Best behavior.
Oh.
Oh, nuts.
All Danny's contacts
I
is just.
don't.
Abby, are you watching them? Is that what's happening, or are you just throwing something away? Just throwing something away.
That makes sense.
Okay. I thought you were like gonna go monitor them in main service.
Ayla put me in charge the one time that we all hung out together.
Logan, at some point, I would say 10 minutes from now when we're done with the game, I would love if you would go check on them and actually see how they're doing in main service.
I will.
That's
And tell the ushers that they're like allowed to kick them out and send them back to class.
I'll be like, actually, please do it. We don't want
No,
them.
no,
Please.
don't intentionally make a scene. I just want to know if a scene
Yeah.
is being made.
Yeah,
Okay.
I will not.
Oh, welcome. Hello. We're just about to make teams. So, you guys ever seen a Rube Goldberg machine?
Say what?
A Rube Goldberg.
I'm not
I've
that
heard
old.
that before, but no.
No one knows what a Rube Goldberg machine is.
I feel like I.
Come in. We're just getting started. I should have queued up a video. I really thought like several of you would say yes.
I know that.
And then you start describing it, and then the rest of you be like, oh, one of those. Could you describe it for us?
Yeah, a Rube Goldberg machine is basically just a big chain reaction with an end goal of doing something.
Doing something. That is right. And that's the lovely part about Rube Goldberg machines. The end result is not fixed, which means the machine can do almost anything. And it's usually just fun to watch. Have you guys ever seen the band OK Go? Who does like YouTube Rube Goldberg machine videos? They like make Rube Goldberg music videos. So there's an entire song they're performing live to a series of things that's happening. Okay, have you ever set up dominoes and the dominoes go?
Mousetrap.
You guys ever played Mousetrap? Okay, so this is the concept, is you literally just set up a bunch of things, and the things do something. When you start the first one, it does the second one. And when the second one happens, it starts the third one, and it just keeps going until something happens at the end. Does that make sense? That's a Rube Goldberg machine. It doesn't have to do anything important. It doesn't have to be a clock that tells you the time. It doesn't have to be a toaster that cooks your bread. It just has to go from A to B to C to D and eventually do something. Okay, so here's your job. I'm going to give you a piece of candy.
Uh-oh.
I would like you to invent a human Rube Goldberg machine. And just because I know it's going to help, I'm going to put one up on the screen here in a second. But I need, oh, we keep getting more students. All right, team size, changing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Okay, 7 per team now. So 7 on this half, you get that bag of Skittles. 7 on this half, you get this bag of Skittles.
Okay, wait, Daniel. I'm only confused about the part. What is a gold collar?
I'm going to put it on the screen because I failed hard. I should have had a video ready for you guys to show you exactly what it is. So I'm going to show you exactly what it is. But go ahead and count yourselves off. Ladies, you just came in. Come pick a team. We're only just starting. Trust me, no one knows what we're doing, including the people who've been here the whole time.
Wait, are we like all on this side of the team?
It's 7 versus 7, 7 on the left versus 7 on the right.
Well, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah.
Yeah.
From Addie
So
this
it's like
way.
Addie on.
Addie on.
Addie on.
Addie all.
Yeah, like Addie on.
What the?
Your hair looks more blonde. It's
Yeah, I was
clean and it
noticing
gets.
that.
I slept.
I don't know why.
I slept with it wet, so it got really puffy, and then it gets really clean, and then it just looks more blonde because it like expands.
I think
I just went outside.
It's an insult to say somebody's hair is blonde.
Vivian shampoo.
I can't. But then I finally found my sister's shampoo, so I can use it again. I use men's.
But you told me that you. What's
Okay,
Why is it
Daniel, I don't
blood?
think the video that you meant to put on.
Is this like a cop show? What are we watching?
Fancy.
That is.
So this is one of my favorite Rube Goldberg machines. They practice this over and over again. The whole machine
yeah,
is
it
actually
seems so
timed to music, so it's not just
I just
the series of events, but it's also the series of events being perfectly timed. They had to change the size and shape of things just to get the timing to match.
Where's the music?
I turned it off.
Why?
Yeah,
I have a policy of not playing secular songs, so we're not listening to the song. It's just a normal average song. It's not anything special. It's the
Copyright
Rube Goldberg
claim on
machine that's
YouTube.
special. So do you see what they're doing where they're just getting things to interact with each other and it's not accomplishing anything?
Yeah, that's what I just
Does that make sense?
was thinking.
It's not achieving anything. It's just continuing the movement of the machine. This is all pent up and it just happens because they slid a car for it.
No one films it when I don't achieve anything.
Do you
Whoa.
time your non-achievements to music?
What's the point?
No, but I should start doing
Okay.
that.
I think that's one of my absolute favorites is the giant box fan and the umbrella. It's so good.
That looks like a car.
That looks like a guitar.
I like
That looks
those.
like a spoon.
And those glasses are all tuned to the song too. It's pretty good.
That looks like a man.
Anyway, so this is a Rube Goldberg machine. Kind of gives you the idea.
It just fell apart.
Yep, just drop the piano on the floor.
Shopping.
Okay.
Hey,
now,
I see those all the time by Home Depot.
I don't want you to get your hopes up too high. I am not expecting anything like this from you. I'm just giving you the concept of thing makes thing happen. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
What are we looking at?
So basically, what Daniel's trying to say.
No, I like see these random people. I just see these random
Can you
people
imagine being
shopping.
the cameraman for this?
Oh yeah, that was.
You're like, oh, sorry guys, sorry, I missed that shot. I'm gonna have to go back and do it
It
again.
was off by 1 second. Reset.
I
the
tripped,
control.
sorry.
I see like
Yeah, the blue failed, they just went for it. Sometimes you have to live with your little mistakes. Okay, so you get the idea. This is like,
No, it's not.
this is only
finished.
halfway done.
It's not finished though.
It's only halfway done. But you get the idea.
No,
Okay.
why'd you cut it off?
It was getting at the good stuff.
Now I'm gonna cry.
Did you notice
Actually,
they were
as
all
that last
covered in
few
paint?
seconds-
It's
on
like
their
going like
jumpsuits?
halfway through a film.
That's because
donut.
towards the finale they all get shot with giant
Donuts.
paint cannons. That's the other fun part about theirs is they have to keep running ahead of the cameraman to get in position for the
Going
next
halfway
thing
through
that happens.
Danish.
All right, welcome, Anthony. Come pick a team. All right, so here's your job. I'm gonna give you guys 8 whole minutes. You get to figure out how to make a human Rube Goldberg machine. That means that most of your pieces, most of your things you're building with are you. You have very little other resources at your disposal. We're not giving you boxes of dominoes. You're not going to get a bunch of pencils. There's no, lining up all the little marbles on the table. It's you guys. So you have to either, make yourself into like the human watering pump, or do yourself a cartwheel and then high five the next person, or you spin around with your eyes closed, and as you like slap into other people, then they do their thing. And you just have to invent it. It's you being the things, the objects that you just saw, and you have to then create a human chain of events. With Anthony, I think now we're up to 1 team of 7, 1 team of 8. So you guys have 7 or 8 pieces in your Rube Goldberg machine. The only requirement is the bag of Skittles I gave you is the finale. That little bag of Skittles.
My bad.
Micah, did you eat the bag of Skittles?
No, I was gonna see if I ate it, if I'd get another bag of Skittles.
I was about to do that, but now it seems so nefarious. I think you guys have to have an open bag of Skittles.
Okay, let's go.
All right, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You want to be on this team or that team? You're on this team? Okay, here's the line. You guys are a team. You must figure out a 7-part Rube Goldberg machine. And you guys are a team. You must figure out an 8-part Rube Goldberg machine. You have 8 minutes. Ready, set, go. I recommend this team takes that side of the room, just so you guys have some space. Get on up out of your chairs. Start talking to each other. Figure out each other's names if you don't know them.
I don't want to do Can we use like Bibles as dominoes? Can anyone here do it? No, actually,
Leaders, pick a team and stick with them so they have some assistance.
Yeah,
some
we don't, he said nothing.
us falling into each other.
Yeah, everyone was like,
I'm saying like at the end of everybody, onto the Skittles.
I will leave the Skittles.
So guys,
It's like doing those
so
things.
guys,
you think of,
yeah, Alex.
think of
Everybody's just like you're like this like
Michael Jackson.
You're like
Remember when I was like obsessed with that?
Dude, we're obsessed with that, and then you fell.
That was so funny.
And then
I was
Abby
like,
decided to pull. We're just gonna be talking.
everyone
Honestly-
wants to spin like the spinny doors at cool malls.
Okay, cool. Okay, so let's go from shortest to tallest. I'm the tallest, obviously.
This is the one time you'll be able to
So like from here all the way down, we're gonna go like this.
oh, that's called abuse.
Don't try the noose.
And then we're gonna see what the chain reaction
Well,
does.
that's extra new first text of the day. Don't try the noose.
don't try the news.
I wasn't going to, Alex.
Well, like, I'm not sure if you'll
We're
like.
doing
I
this
wasn't
one
going.
called survival of the
Don't show that to Dan. But
No, Alan, that's not funny.
I was being serious. This was the point when I was being serious.
I know, but that's still not funny.
suggesting ones that have to do with life.
No, I know. These are things about people.
Any other ideas?
Okay,
You know what?
Does anyone know how to do a cartwheel?
Oh,
Give us the cartwheel idea.
We don't
Who has
do
a cartwheel? Who
anything.
could-
Kira,
no.
no, I'm not doing a cartwheel.
Oh, looks like she signed up for the cartwheel.
Logan, I'm not playing Pokemon today with you. If you make me do a cartwheel.
I care.
You play Pokemon?
one time I had like 1,000 cards.
Just learn to cover.
Bro, I had like 1,000 cards and it took me like multiple
I
hours.
didn't do a cartwheel. He knows.
I don't think that does anything with karate.
I can do a cartwheel.
Well, Addie
Alex
either
can do the cartwheel,
copy
but that has nothing to do
Guys,
with
I'll do like
started.
I'll do like my little sister's cartwheel when she's like,
Elena is so adorable. I can do it. Actual cartwheel.
Wait, how about for a chain reaction? One person hits the other person. We can do a cartwheel position, and then the other person, a human, is forced to roll unless. Well, the person's forced to roll because the other person's kicking them over and over, right?
Well, the whole
Like,
time
you just
someone
made
with their
that,
arm
right?
out
Yeah.
and someone goes,
give me the bag of Skittles. Where's the bag of Skittles?
guys,
Human
just throw them all over the room, and our
Alright.
train reaction
No,
will
no,
be
no,
everybody
no, no, no.
diving in.
No,
One person kicks the
We
other
could just like do a spin and then slap it in the other person and they'll like spin.
Yeah, and then we keep kicking them.
Yo,
do the cartwheel.
you know what? I was about
So
to
I
say something
so I can do the chain.
on accident.
I can be the chain, and like you can be like the blend.
Guys, I got an
what would be
idea.
the, what would like be?
Balance out.
What?
It hurts, and then you'll have to walk. He's got an idea.
Bro, school hurts my brain.
It doesn't.
Here's what we could do, right, Micah?
Let's do a human drawbridge.
Well,
So we could do like a spin cycle.
Like the marble track.
No.
Use.
No, that can be a part of it. That's always a good solid part.
Okay, so Micah and Alan are doing a spin cycle. Let's go.
Oh, that hurt my rib.
Micah's gonna want to slap someone. So whoever's after
This is gonna
Micah-
end up
whoever's
really
after
bad.
Micah,
It will.
watch out.
This is gonna end up everybody has a black eye and a broken knee. Like
Hey, it's like me too alone.
It was like Carter. Do a cartwheel, smack Mike in the face. You whatever spin cycle.
I have an idea.
Then everybody else is just like,
I'm not gonna take your hat.
you got the black eye too.
Give it to me now. Okay, thank you. Thank
See,
you.
at least you have a reason for your legs and like your ankles
Thou
hurt.
shalt not take a
I
man's
don't.
hat. That's
I
the-
sleep and wake up and then I'm in
Alan,
pain.
so wear this hat, and then oh, there's another hat.
No, there has to be a second
Now
part.
wait.
Tony's hat.
I need your
Let's
Angela.
go.
Okay.
No, you gotta put them. No, you gotta put them different ways.
Right. And now, no.
Micah, switch it.
Dude, this can, yeah, you could go like this. You could like put your hat up and give it to someone.
Wait, I just had an idea. No, what if, okay, you're gonna put it
How
on
are we
super
doing
tightly.
escalate?
We just go around like this.
Just buy it.
No, like the thing at the airport, so like they like it's like I don't even know what's that.
I know.
Have people crawl.
Wait,
We're attempting to make a huge room for
Okay.
basically
down.
chain of events
Okay, so
leading
it's on
from
like.
like one person.
Oh wow, your head's actually
being
pretty small.
high-fived.
Turn around, kick the other
Spin
person's
around.
shin, and then they.
That person kicks this person. That person does a cartwheel. That person slaps that person.
Hold on. No.
hi.
We will make this work.
But they have to figure out how
So
it works.
basically the point
Oh
is
my
no
god.
failing, right? Got it. Okay, point. Okay.
They did it already.
I don't know. I'm like medium.
They already have an idea.
Yeah,
Goldberg.
I think he already.
Where did the Skittles go?
Only because Daniel
Let's go back to me. Guys, who's got the Skittles?
I finished Harry Potter. Alan,
with a human escalator.
I'm the alpha bird. How about that, guys?
Army's like really
Go.
annoying.
Like
Okay, do we have any steps? This
No,
round?
guys, let's do birds. Let's do birds on a telephone wire.
You know what? We'll just do
I
this.
have a good idea. How about instead of doing it, the reaction like
No, don't bend it. No, don't bend it.
Oh wait, this is yours? My bad. Hold on.
instead of reaction.
You know what? That won't work either.
Upside down.
Let's do the Elsa play, guys.
Just like
Yeah, let's act out the entire
bro,
movie.
like at
No,
Disneyland, just be like.
Can we do like birds on a telephone wire? Just like 2 people.
And then to taunt. Oh, guys, I have an idea. And then to taunt Daniel
on
on
the phone, so like you get all the like.
Okay, I just had an idea.
Okay.
Okay, so
Right as I was trying to do that, my old phone shut itself off completely restarted.
and then
I lost all of my pictures, all of my games.
down the other
So
side.
the other.
And then it hits it the other way down. And
Okay.
it moves the other person's side down. So it's like
I
going
like that. I like that.
Basic. Okay, guys.
So we have someone spinning.
Try and let's try and get the hats into the trash. Let's try and get the hats into the trash.
Guys, I feel like
Alice.
like slapping.
Wait,
Alice.
Alice.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
We have a second
Stay still.
step.
Oh, let's go. Oh.
This hand needs to be on top.
That was funny. Okay.
We're switching it up.
You're managing.
Okay.
Right.
You're a failure. You're a failure.
Okay, me and Logan have a second step.
I like the water.
Someone needs to volunteer.
Okay. No.
Wait, what?
Logan, me and you will do it. Ready? I'll start.
And then we're
And
gonna
then
all
someone else on this
And
side.
then it knocks their arm down. No, it knocks their arm down.
And
Because they're
domino.
moving, so it goes like that instead of like that.
not
There
over.
it
And then
down.
it's basically in
And
the
then
end all the
turn
arms
this,
are
and
going
then
like
pass it between
this.
your legs behind you.
Is that it?
No.
Nope.
That's
No,
that's a
that's-
simple.
that's
we
a
have
step.
that one. We have the
And at the end, I should just throw it on
I
the
have no
floor.
idea what.
I feel like they're doing much
Alan with the hat.
Be like,
I feel like you're supposed to be like throwing
Wait, you know the leapfrog thing where someone like gets down, someone jumps over them? You do that.
Oh no! He grabs her legs and like they flip, but it's just like. And then
Wait, what? Carter, come back.
Hurry up!
Come back.
I know. I couldn't tell if you.
Carter's just like, I don't know what I'm doing.
Okay, so what steps do we have so far? We gotta try out what we have so far.
Spinning gears, then we
Okay.
have the arm levers.
Should the spinning gears be in the beginning and after or before the?
No, guys, really, I think we should just throw Daniel off.
I mean,
We know. We could do that. And like the.
Alright guys, you have 5 seconds.
Hurry up!
We have
Yeah,
no
I think
ideas.
it's working
Okay,
good.
you'll be Elsa.
You don't have an
I'll be-
idea.
Wait, you don't have an idea?
No, we do.
We have,
No,
we
no,
have
I was
multiple
gonna
ideas,
do.
but nobody ever
I
wants
was
to
gonna
put
throw
it in.
you
You're all
off.
talking. Be Elsa.
Okay,
plans.
Okay, wait,
this is
well,
the simplest
have you-
solution. Everyone does their idea.
Yeah.
Okay. I have an idea.
Where are the Skittles? Where are the Skittles?
No,
Where are the Skittles? Give me the Skittles. Elsa's right, so you should let
I'll just read my idea.
Just do that the whole. Why are your skills looking
No, I'll
nasty?
do this at the end
Who's
of
been
the
holding the Skittles?
I was crushing. I gotta eat this one. And I
They're
got
all like sweaty and smushed.
Hey, do that at the end.
So like,
okay, we like
It's like my brother.
It's okay. It's okay.
Can I meet the
All right. You guys got to figure out some sort of chain reaction at a time. Some sort of in a row, some sort of one to the next.
Alright, somebody.
Lever arm.
Somebody be
Okay,
in
lever
yeah.
arms. Can I be
Are you guys
the-
gonna be gears in the
the
machine?
lever arm.
No, okay.
Basic.
No, we're slugging.
We're just punching? That's it? That's a terrible idea.
Micah, you can't
Alan,
start
you
it
actually have
yet,
to react. You
Micah.
can't just take the slaps. You have to
You
spin.
can't start
There
it
you go.
yet, Micah.
Like this?
It's called practice. He's practicing.
Oh my god. You're gonna make yourself die.
Micah. It's a decent idea, but actually slapping them as hard as you can is not part of the idea.
No,
Wow.
are you talking about Alan when you?
Violence isn't the
No, I
reality.
just meant being a gear and like interfacing with everyone else as a gear is a decent idea.
Slap it.
But like you don't have to.
So I'll just be like smack hard.
Oh, you got like an up down going. Okay.
The end.
the end result is everyone has a black eye.
That is a terrible end result. The worst finale, in fact.
It's the best finale because
How
everyone.
about everybody should just fall?
Kira, just come up with an idea then.
Everybody should just fall dramatically on the floor. That's it.
Yeah, it's all dominoes going up.
And then everybody's
Bro, will you one hand my collar? No, like you each
That was really funny, but I felt really
because
bad.
they will have just got something done to them, right?
No, wait, no. I need the Skittles. I need the Skittles.
So like if I was gonna throw this.
Wait.
You can roll the Skittles.
Don't
No, I didn't do this. That's why I need the Skittles on this. You dropped
Okay.
I thought.
I did.
How about we do like a secret handshake type thing? Where it's
Secret handshake's good.
And we have to hide
Yeah.
You guys are out of time.
Put it in.
So you have to be in a line and just do it.
Just communicate
I'll
with
do
your.
it.
Alright, so who's second to last? Because they're gonna be last.
Okay, then the lever is second.
Which is the start? Is that in the start or is this in the
We're the
start?
start.
No, that's the.
I don't want to do
this
it.
This is the start.
Okay.
ready?
So girls, this is the start. That's the end. Walk over that way.
Okay, levers.
Anthony is the.
Alright, you guys ready?
Wait, are you
You walked in at just the right moment.
No.
That's the beginning.
Bro, my
You get to watch the insanity with no context.
It's not insanity.
It's slightly insanity. Slightly insanity. All right. Does Anthony know what his job is?
Yes.
I'll do a
Anthony's the end
cartwheel.
of the
Start.
chain.
Claire, you keep doing the right hand. You have
Yeah, to start, she's gonna do a cartwheel.
Oh, wait, and hit your
You're
hand.
gonna double high five.
Gently.
that way.
Probably take my
I don't know. Do a dizzy spin and then like throw the Skittles and double high five.
My bad.
Oh, wait, actually come this way.
Okay, so I just gonna do
Are
a
you ready?
cartwheel and hit my hand, and I'm
not
gonna
yet.
go like this.
Okay, that's perfect.
Alright.
All right, you guys ready?
Careful.
Yes.
Okay, here we go.
Overlap hands, guys. Overlap hands. Yeah, like that. Perfect.
Okay,
Oh, this is so much better.
here we go. On your marks, get set, go.
Oh my god.
Let's go.
Yes.
Beautiful. Oh, that was amazing. That was lovely. All right. Very nice. Very nice.
I can't do half.
I don't want to see
I already got.
One hand.
Where's my hat?
I have to you still have your blue glasses. From that family came up.
Rough time.
I don't know whose hat this is.
I'm so hungry. I'm right here.
Okay.
You're right there.
I was like, there's black, there's red. Red. Alan wasn't sitting on the purple.
I wasn't sitting on the black. Oh, I want to see this. I missed it.
All right, that was lovely. All right, everyone have a seat.
They're already sitting.
I declare the game a tie.
We get to see all of them.
If I was giving out bonus points, I think I gotta give bonus points for like actually sticking to your idea and just going with it on this side, and you guys just being willing to do it even if you
Creative.
don't have a plan.
We had one.
Even if there is no plan, just going for it. That was beautiful.
Not that we were forced.
All right, grab a Bible, crack it open to 1 Corinthians. No, the other one. First Chronicles. Wrong Testament.
First Chronicles. And
First Chronicles. We did chapter 1 last week. We're in chapter 2, 3, 4, 5,
Oh wait.
6, 7, 8, and 9 today.
Oh, it's
Before we get started, did anybody follow through on the ridiculous challenge last week?
No. What was it?
I got busy
To
with school.
count
So.
the names in chapters 2 through 9.
I know it. It's 78.
78.
Skills.
All right.
It's
If
not
anyone thinks they
78,
counted
trust
it
me,
and
it's
they're
way
being
more.
honest, they want to give out their number.
Oh,
I'm not going to tell you if you're right because I don't want anyone else to like just cheat and say your number. But I would like to hear if you actually counted and what number you got. Yeah.
I did this for fun a while ago,
Oh,
but I got 79.
79. Okay.
Nope.
Anybody else? Chapters 2 through 9. So that's 2, 3, 4,
It's
5,
78.
6, 7, 8, and 9. No one did it?
12,000.
I started and then
How far did you get? I'm
I
curious.
got halfway.
You got halfway?
And then I had a bunch of school.
Oh, okay. So how
And then
many,
I had
how many
my
names did you
soccer.
count when you went to the halfway point?
I just wrote after each chapter I wrote it down and then I didn't add.
You didn't count them, you just wrote the names?
No, I wrote down the number
Oh, okay.
and then
okay.
just did I never finished.
Oh, so like for chapter 1 you wrote a number, for chapter 2 you wrote a number.
So like
for
I would do it by
chapter-
like paragraphs and then
That's
write
smart.
the number. And
That's
then,
smart. Yeah,
and
then
at
you can
the
just
end
add
add
up the
it
numbers
all
at
up
the
with the
end.
calculator.
So
and
you
then-
never actually totaled it though?
No. I got halfway.
That's
And
good.
then I got
That's
like
good.
super busy.
It took me hours. I did the challenge just so I could grade your work, but no one actually completed it. So that's
Wait,
That's a lot of my life.
what was the actual
What
number? What was the actual number?
Like I've said.
all right. So
What's the number?
I'll give you guys an extra week if anyone wants to actually do it.
Oh, I'll do it.
Well,
But I'll give you a hint. Anyone who said it was 70 something is lying. They didn't even try, because it's
It's
not
1,000.
even close to 100.
it's
It's not even close to 200.
Wait, what?
It's 1,000.
If you go from chapters 2 to chapter 9 and you do everything chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4, chapter 5, chapter 6, chapter 7, chapter 8, chapter 9, it's several hundred. And if you count, and this is what I need to know after you give me your number, if you count unique names or names, so your system's a good system, but you won't notice when the names get repeated.
Oh, I know this.
Well, but you won't account for that. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah.
By like the 7th use of Levi, you're gonna forget. Was it Levi or Levi? And you might count it again.
Wait, do you
so
count last
if you
names?
count unique names, there's one answer, and if you count total name uses, it's almost exactly double. So there's
Yeah,
two
we do
correct
know.
answers depending on how you count. I'll take either answer. Yeah.
We also, we weren't counting names of tribes or names of places.
Good. I
Is that
also did not.
accurate? Okay.
And it is still several hundred.
Wait, do we do
1,000,
last names
12
too?
In this case, if someone's name is a two-part name, we're counting it as one name. Yeah. So there's like Caleb, Ephratha, something Jerium. I forget the first half of Jerium, but it's hyphenated, so we're counting it as one name.
Okay, what about
Does that make
Julius
sense?
Caesar?
Yeah.
1,241.
Alright, it's
Not-
256.
Oh, also tell me what translation you did it in. I've so far completed it in New King James and NLT, but if you're going to count in some other translation, you gotta let me know.
Do
'cause
it in
It's a little
NLT.
different. Sometimes they pronoun someone where they could have used a proper, and then it throws the count off. Otherwise, they're actually all really close, because one of the only things you don't change in translation is usually the name. Okay, well, you guys have one extra week. We're going to sum up. Oh, actually, wait a second. I put one of the answers in the slides.
Wait, what did you say was the
I
one
put
with all
one
the
of the
names?
answers in the slides. We're gonna skip that slide.
Wait, did you, wait, what chapters was it that we were doing?
Chapters 2 through 9, which is what we're actually studying today.
Oh, so how many names? First Chronicles?
All right, so for context, we jumped from 1 Samuel all the way up to 1 Chronicles. And some of you guys were here last week, so you already got the spill on that, but a lot of you guys were not here last week, so I'll give you the quick version. 1 Samuel is where we were at before, and you can see that was written over here around 930 BC. That's like towards the end of the book's timeline. It actually starts somewhere closer to like 1000 BC. And then we jumped all the way over to 1 Chronicles, it was written around 450 BC. But they cover a lot of the same territory, and the reason is that 1 Samuel was written as sort of a journal. It's happening as they're writing it down. Whereas Chronicles is written like a history book. It's written after it's already happened. So it's a look back at things. Chronicles is also different because Chronicles covers everything from Adam all the way up to the point that they really want to talk about, the part they really are concerned with that's most of the book. So even though it covers all the same time period as 1 Samuel, it actually also gives you a quick review of everything from Genesis through 1 Samuel. So we started last week at Adam and we jumped down the generations thousands of years in one chapter. And now we're going to go ahead and cover in as fast a time as we can chapters 2 through 9, because what chapters 2 through 9 do is they recount the family tree, not just the timeline, but the family tree from this point in history all the way up to 1 Samuel. The whole family tree. So not just one line, this guy had this kid, had this kid, had this kid, but then when you're done with that little this kid, this kid, this kid dance, you go back up to the top of the tree, go over one to that guy's brother, and then you go all the way down that side of the tree. And sometimes as you're going down the tree, it stops at Uncle so-and-so and goes left too, and also right. And so you get like an entire family tree of Israel in one book. And it takes up everything from chapter 1 to 9. We only covered chapter 1 last week because I wanted to actually look at that one in a little more depth. Now, one of the reasons I gave you guys this challenge was I'd like you to actually get eyes on all of these chapters. We're not going to have time for that today. We're only going to skim, we're going to sum up, because it is just so much information. And once you go and take the challenge, if you actually try and figure out how many names are in there, you'll see why. It is almost 1/3 names.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? From chapters 2 through 9, about 1/3 of the total words on the page are names.
Does the word count as a name?
A word does not count as a name.
I said Lord.
Wait, which one?
Lord.
Oh, Lord. Oh, good one, good one. Let's say, since in English it's not, no.
Okay.
You can absolutely make the case easily that in Hebrew it is. But in English we don't use it that way, so we're going to say no. We'll count names that we would think of as the name of a person in English. I know it's a little nuanced when you get into the Bible, because there's names of cities, there's names of people groups, and in many cases, especially in chapters 2 through 9, the people group got named after a guy, and so their people group name is the name of the guy. And cities sometimes have the name of a guy. And so the name of the city is also the name of a guy. So I'm not going to count it as a name unless it gets used as a name, but you do get some that are both. So Israel in chapters 2 through 9 is both the name of Jacob, because he gets renamed Israel, and the name of the nation. They use it both ways. So you can count it as a name in your tally. I know, it's crazy. Okay. Let's read a little bit of chapter 2 so we kind of get the introduction. Chapter 2, verses 1 and 2. The sons of Israel were Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Dan, Joseph, Benjamin, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. In no particular order, apparently. So, these are the core sons of the guy renamed Israel, Jacob. I don't know if you guys remember Jacob. He was the son who stole the birthright with the help of his mom, ran away to live with uncle, fell in love, married the wrong woman, then married the right woman, ended up marrying 2 more women, had a big giant family. That guy.
Sounds like a Shakespeare play.
You wonder where Shakespeare got it sometimes. I think he was inspired by some of this stuff. Because, the family trees in the Bible get a little messy, and it usually comes from sin. It's how it worked with Jacob. It wasn't always Jacob's sin. Sometimes it was other guys' sin. But, sin messes things up. And then you have to live with the consequences. And so he ends up having a lot of strife in his family. Those original sons, short of Benjamin, they all have it out for his favorite son because he has a favorite son. Why would you have a favorite son? That's a terrible idea, but he did. He had a favorite son. Well, because he ended up marrying 4 women and he only meant to marry 1. And at the time, that son was the only son of his favorite wife. Shouldn't have a favorite wife because you shouldn't have a choice. You should just have the one wife. That's it. Should be that simple. But he had a favorite wife, so he ended up with a favorite son. It messed with the whole family. That son is Joseph. I think most of you guys know his story. Gets sold as a slave by the older brothers who don't like him because he's the favorite. And then as a slave, he ends up in Egypt. He ends up rising through the ranks of power from slave to prisoner to second in command over the entire nation, and purely because God had his hand on him. God was guiding his life. But as the family comes back together, as Joseph saves everyone's life and everyone forgives each other, they reunite, they become a tight-knit family, and that family grows into the nation of Israel. And the branches in the nation, they call them tribes, kind of like what we have today as states. We have 50 states. They had 12 tribes. Those grew out of the 12 brothers, families. So if you go back far enough on the Israel family tree, eventually you get to a bunch of shared uncles. And that's what 2 through 9 is. You can look down in any translation, you'll usually find the same thing. Little bold sections that are subtitled, but beyond the chapters. They're usually a little smaller than a chapter. And it tells you, first one, descendants of Judah. And it's like, Judah's grandson has run. And so you go through a few of the branches of Judah's major limb on the family tree. And then you'll jump back to one of the sons, who's a brother of Judah. And then you'll go through a few of his branches. And then you'll jump back again. So I've summed it up. Here you go. This is the major family tree. You've got chapters 2 through most of 4, and we made up the chapters. The author didn't put the chapters in, so, it breaks funny. But yeah, chapters 2 through most of 4 is Judah, and then you've got Simeon, then you've got Reuben, then you've got Gad. And you can see some of these are part of a chapter, like this. Reuben's got like 10 verses. And then others are multiple chapters. So like Levi, he gets 6 and 7, or sorry, that's all of 6. I misread. But yeah, you've got some that cross the chapter lines. These families, though, end up being super duper important to the nation because inside of Israel's legal system, you were granted land. God provided for your family based on your family. You could sell your home, you could rent your home out, that kind of thing still happened, but you were meant to get it back. It's kind of a weird thing we don't do now, but these lands were inherited, and so when you would sell it off, it was always with an end date. And at the end of that time, you were supposed to get back that land. Now, it might be so far out there that you still, for all intents and purposes, don't own that land. It might be like close to when you die, you're going to get it back. But you're supposed to get it back. And it was all based on who you're related to, who you were born from, who you descended from. But when Chronicles is being written is a very unique point in history. It's after all this has happened, after all the land's been divvied up, after everyone's lived on their family lands for generations, they fell away from God. They abandoned him. They worshipped false gods. God sent prophet after prophet calling them back. Come on, guys, you know better than this. And they kept on disobeying. They kept on going their own way until eventually God punishes them. And the punishment came in 2 waves. He did like the north part of the country and then the south later. But it was essentially the same. Almost everyone was killed or kidnapped and taken out of the country. It's a very unusual thing. It hasn't happened many times in history that an entire nation is picked up out of their land and moved to another place, but it happened to Israel. And as they're all carted off to Babylon, they're left with this promise ringing in their ears from all the prophets that warned them they were going to get punished. And the promise was, the punishment won't last. There's an end date on your punishment. And one day, God will call you back into your land. He's going to give it back to you. Now, first off, I said this rarely ever happens in history, that someone is brought out of their land, that like an entire people group is kidnapped. That is super duper rare. But it's never happened, ever in history, besides to Israel, that after they were removed from their land, they got it back. And the weird thing is, for Israel, it happened twice. They got plucked out of their land twice. And twice they got it back. It's never happened to anyone else even once, but to them it's happened twice. So Chronicles is written as they're getting their land back. And this is why it's all laid out in glorious detail from chapters 2 through 9. Because when you get back, you're supposed to get an inheritance. You're supposed to get a piece of land based on which family you came from. Only the problem is, it used to be the case, you just knew which piece of land it was because it was the same one as Grandpa's. Right? Grandpa passes away and everyone's like, oh, cool, I get Grandpa's place now. Like, that's just normal. That's how it was going for generation and generation and generation. But now, as they come back into the land, and they haven't lived there for decades, it's not so easy anymore, because Grandpa probably passed away in Babylon, and he was never able to go show you where his land was and say, that one's going to be yours someday. So now you've got an entire country's worth of people walking into a country they've never really lived in. And they're supposed to know where to go. They're supposed to know which piece of land is theirs. I don't know if you guys have ever been with your parents during like a real estate meeting when you're buying a piece of land or buying a house. It can be a little messy. We just bought a piece of land not too long ago, me and Emily, and we're building a house there right now. And something messy happened, and we weren't ready for it. We weren't prepared because we'd never done this before. We didn't notice on the title that there's all this crazy language about how you walk off the corners of the land. I'll bring it in for you guys to read sometimes. It's hysterical how they write legally the title deed that says walk from this point to 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 this point, and that's the outline of your land. And it does it all by this north corner of the south corner of the north corner of this thing language. It's just ridiculous. But we didn't notice when we bought the land, it was actually 4 separate parcels and an easement. We thought it was 1 parcel and an easement. An easement is the road in front of us. We're like, yeah, that's fine. We're not going to build our house on the road. Who cares? But the fact that it was 4 separate parcels totally escaped us. And so we go to build the house, and we're like, yeah, we want it like this. We're like, oh, you can't do that. That's on 2 parcels. What? I only bought 1. No, you bought 4. What? And so we had to like pause the whole project. You can't build, you can't put in your septic, you can't put in anything because you want to cross all these lines in your property. It's like, yeah, but it's all 1 piece of property. No, it's 4. We're like, what? So we had to like wait and join all the pieces together legally so they're all 1 piece of property. And then you can build your house diagonal through the middle, which, you know, if we just straightened the house out, it would have been fine. But we wanted it diagonal, so now it's diagonal. It's all happy. Everything looks nice. But yeah, land is tricky. And so as they all walk back in, it could be a huge fight. It could be a huge argument. All these, you know, brothers and sisters, all these people are related to each other, but you start throwing in free land into the mix, and you just kind of shrug and go, we'll figure it out. That's not going to work well. There's going to be a lot of infighting, a lot of arguing over, but I'm pretty sure Mom told me when we were in Babylon, this one's mine. No. That one came from Aunt Sally. That one goes to Judah. It'd be a nightmare. So they take all these chapters to lay out the family trees, and then they can say, so you're from that family, right? Yeah? Okay. This is your section. You guys live here now. And so for them, this is monumentally important. This is their entire livelihood. They don't get to move back into the country and like get a job at McDonald's. There's no places of employment for them. Does that make sense? There's nowhere to go and work. You just have to go and work your land. That's all there is. There's nothing else. So your land was as important as it could get at this point. So there you go. There's those chapters. And then we move down, because remember we're doing through 9. This is only chapter 7. There's a little more detail at the end. And that goes towards some special categories of people. So the beginning, when you actually read through chapter 2, you get Judah first, but Judah leads down to David, and then we focus on David for a little bit. And then we go back over here, and we're at the end, and it goes to Saul. And this is really interesting, because if you were going through 1 Samuel with us, you know that's backwards. Right? Saul was the first king. David was the second king. But the writers of Chronicles, they throw it backwards, and on purpose. God has this interesting symbology all throughout the Bible. It keeps on happening. There was a first, but I picked the second. God keeps doing this over and over and over and over again. There was a first, but I picked the second. He does it twice the first time. I know this is really weird sounding, but he does it twice the first time. So you got Adam and Eve, right? And they have kids. Who do they have?
Cain, Abel, and Seth.
Cain, Abel, and Seth. Now you mentioned them all 3 at once, but that's not really how it went, did it?
Well,
Was it?
Cain killed Abel, and then Seth.
Okay, so
And
you've
the
got
other
Cain and Abel. God picks Abel. So there was a first, but he picks a second. Then Cain kills Abel. Then they have Seth. So now there's Cain and Seth. And he picked Abel first, but now he's going to pick the second one he picks. So he goes, not the first, but the second. Not the first, but the second. And this just keeps happening. God keeps doing this. Not the first, second. He keeps doing it all down through the line. You keep reading through the Old Testament, you'll see it again and again and again and again. It happened with Jacob and Esau. We say Jacob and Esau, but in birth order, it was Esau and Jacob. But he doesn't pick Esau. He picks Jacob. Well, with the kings too. We've got Saul. He was chosen by the people's criteria. He was tall. He was handsome. He was strong. The people's criteria picked Saul. God still picked him because he knew everyone in the nation, but he knew who fit the people's criteria. But God doesn't pick Saul. God picks David. There was a first, but God picks the second. And so Chronicles is paying attention to who God picks. And so Chronicles puts David out there in front. Because David was meant to be the example. He wasn't perfect, but he did a pretty good job of following after God's heart. And then at the end, they walk up to Saul. Because they want to start showing the structure of Israel, the offices of Israel, the kingship, the priesthood. And so they go through all these different jobs here at the end of what you can do. And we're actually going to read some of this. I want to go into it with you guys. And that's why we played the Rube Goldberg machine today, is because having a job in a larger machine can be far more important than the job you have. That is one of the things that God utilizes in his kingdom, and he was doing it all the way back then. That if you are playing a role that God gives you in a grander work that he's writing, then your job can actually become more important than your job is. Does that sort of make sense?
No.
Okay, I'll give you an example. How many doctors do you think work at Enloe?
Hundreds.
Hundreds, right?
Yeah, hundreds.
Okay, so if they went from like 102 doctors today to 101 doctors tomorrow, do you think like the whole hospital is going to crumble and fall apart?
Yes.
No. It is not going to just fall apart because they went down from 102 to 101. But if your doctor walked out of your operating room during your surgery, would it sort of mess up the surgery just a little bit?
A lot.
You would die.
It'd be kind of important, right? The nurses are all just standing there like, "Doctor!" That would be kind of a huge deal. And at the same time, if a doctor at Enloe was heard to have walked out of surgery with no good reason and just let you die on the table, suddenly that hits the news, that goes out in the paper, goes out on the internet. Some kid died in his surgery because the doctor just walked out.
And then nobody.
That's gonna like
again.
completely disrupt the reputation of Enloe. Not just that one doctor.
don't trust doctors.
No. It's a hypothetical, my God. This hasn't happened.
I don't trust doctors anymore.
So, your job sometimes has importance that's greater than like what the job actually is. Now, it's really important that person on the operating table live. But also, if you doing something wrong in this moment could tear apart the entire hospital, that will affect even more than just one life. That's going to have a ripple effect. And in God's kingdom, it's usually like this, but even more so, but usually in the positive sense. So rather than walking out and you destroy the reputation, think of it in the Christian sense. When we work in God's kingdom, we on our own, we're one of billions. So, what does it matter if God goes from 3,000,000,001 people working for his kingdom to 3 billion people working in his kingdom? What's the big deal? Right? That doesn't seem that important. Or when he goes from 3,000,000,001 to 3,000,002,000. It's not that important. It's just one more, right? Who cares? But that's not actually how it works in his kingdom. In his kingdom, when you have an effect, you're having an eternal effect. And so it has this nice little multiplier next to it. So you bring one person to the Lord, you do one thing for God, but it's got eternal weight attached. So now it's not one thing, it's one eternity. Does that make sense? Like that's a different kind of counting. If you're adding up eternities every time someone is brought into the kingdom, suddenly the importance of just one more becomes very large. Likewise, when you are obeying the eternal, almighty, all-powerful, holy God, it is not the same as just obeying a person. It's not the same anymore. Suddenly, there's this multiplier attached to what you're doing. And so God has these jobs, and some of the jobs seem really mundane, like almost silly. Okay, we're going to kind of skip these because I thought maybe you guys would have some cool answers. We're going to go ahead and just read. So flip on over to 1 Chronicles chapter 9.
Daniel, I'm already at 500.
Oh, you're counting right now? Nice. 1 Chronicles chapter 9.
Numbers, will it help or not?
Logan just says numbers.
59.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
69.
No, let's not just say numbers. Let's read some of 1 Chronicles 9. The first 3 verses say this.
39. Yep.
So all Israel was listed in the genealogical records in the book of the kings of Israel. The people of Judah were exiled to Babylon because they were unfaithful to the Lord. The first of the exiles to return to their property in the former towns were priests, Levites, temple servants, and other Israelites. Some of the people from the tribes of Judah, Benjamin, Ephraim, and Manasseh came and settled in Jerusalem. Now, to put that in context, those are people who don't live next to each other on the map. They live in all the corners of Israel. They're all over the place. And they're all moving into the capital, which is down in Judah, the southern portion of Israel. So these people, some of them live way up in the top part of the country in terms of what land they should inherit. But they're all going to move into the capital and start the capital first. That kind of makes sense, right? If you're living in some post-apocalyptic United States of America, you might all move to one big city first and kind of spread out back from there. That's sort of what they're doing. They're starting in Jerusalem. They're going to rebuild the main city, and then they might go find their own little plots of land. But they might just live in the main city. Maybe they'll do that for a while. All right, so they move back there. Then we're going to jump down, because you've got the priesthood primarily. That's the ones who come back first, and then a few people from these other tribes. Now we're going to jump down to verse 22. This is going to focus in on those priests and the jobs they have. That's what I wanted you to look at. In all, there were 212 gatekeepers in those days, and they were listed according to the genealogies in their villages. So Chronicles is letting us know there's more written than what's in Chronicles. We have some of the genealogies listed here, but they stop at a certain height on the family tree, and they don't go any further. And Chronicles is saying, oh, trust me, we went further. we went all the way down, okay, guys? But they're not putting it all in this one record. So they had other records, they had other lists they were making to get you up to the name that was mentioned in Chronicles chapters 2 through 9. And they made sure all that was recorded so they could tell exactly which branch you came from. And they're going to tell us why here in a second. There's going to be a reason. Yeah?
Dang it, I forgot.
Oh, sorry. Well, if you think of it, put it up again. I'll try and get you quicker. All right, so there's 212 gatekeepers back in the olden days before everything was destroyed. And if you go back and you want to, that verse 17, they give you the names. Here's all the gatekeepers. Sounds like a pretty mundane job. Some of you guys have parents that do similar things. We have a security team here, and they sort of just stand at the gates. Ours are doors, but theirs were gates. And they just stand there and they make sure that everything happening is right. Everything happening is right. The security team, if you're doing everything good, just smiles at you and shakes your hand. Like nothing happens that shouldn't happen under their watch. But then if you did something not right, they'd step into action. They'd immediately pounce on that situation and say, no, we're not doing this. This is coming to a stop. So that's their job. They just sit there and they're just nice guys most of the time, because most of the time we're just doing what we should be doing. We're doing good stuff. We're here to worship the Lord. And they're all for that. And even back there at the temple and the tabernacle before that, they had gatekeepers, people who just stood there and were like, hi, welcome, yes, come on in. Oh, you're new? Yeah, right this way. It's like this. And if something wrong was to happen, then they'd be there. They would see it and they'd put a stop to it right away. 212 of those back in the original days. And now, verse 24, we get some details. The gatekeepers were stationed on all four sides, east, west, north, and south. Their relatives in the villages came regularly to share their duties for 7-day periods. The four chief gatekeepers, all Levites, were trusted officials, for they were responsible for the rooms and treasuries at the house of God. So they were called gatekeepers, but they had jobs beyond gatekeeping. If you moved up and you were the head of your family, you were like the eldest male, or you're just the one who's kind of the patriarch right now, you're leading the family, you would get extra responsibility that wasn't gate related. You had other jobs, but you were still under the heading, the title of gatekeeper. We already read that. Verse 27. They would spend the night around the house of God, since it was their duty to guard it and to open the gates every morning. Some of the gatekeepers were assigned to care for the various articles used in worship. They checked them in and out to avoid any loss. Others were responsible for the furnishings, the items in the sanctuary, and the supplies, such as choice flour, wine, olive oil, frankincense, and spices. But it was the priests who blended the spices. So these guys were not priests. They were not in charge of the spiritual things, but in fact they were. They were in charge of making sure the spiritual things were taken care of. These implements used in sacrifice, these implements used in worship, were guarded. But they weren't guarded by the priesthood, they were guarded by these other Levites. So they had this other job. And if they failed at their job, the priest couldn't really do much. Like if you don't have a sacrifice, you can't go sacrifice. Right? If you don't have the incense to burn, you can't go burn incense. So it's a pretty important job, even if it's not the same job. And it was critical for worship, it was critical for sacrifice that someone do that job, even though they weren't the priest doing the final step in the job. Some members of the clan of Kohath were in charge of preparing the bread to be set on the table each Sabbath day. So there was even jobs like baking bread, and this is all under gatekeeper. Verse 33, the musicians all prominent Levites lived at the temple. They were exempt from other responsibilities since they were on duty at all hours. We're going to come back to that. All these men lived in Jerusalem. They were the heads of the Levite families and were listed as prominent leaders in their genealogical records. So there was a lot of jobs, but one of them is worship leader in the sense that we think of it, which is singing. Now, back then, worship wasn't something that's synonymous with singing. It wasn't mostly singing. That's mostly what we mean now when we say worship. We mean sing. It's usually how we use it now. But that's not really what they used it as. They had lots of modes, lots of ways to worship, and we still do. It's just in English we don't really say it that way. But they did. And so to them, what we think of as like a worship leader, to them was a musician. And they worked all the time. So they had to take it in shifts because they were meant to be playing music for the Lord constantly. I want you to picture that for a second, that you could come to the church anytime, day or night, and we had actual worship leaders going the whole time. There's just like a worship room you could walk into, and there's just live worship going on all of the time. That'd be cool. I don't know how he pulled it off, but I just think it'd be cool. I don't know who would even make use of it. There'd probably be lots of nights where no one even comes by, but it'd just be cool. You could like put a little like window. We have so few windows in this building. I'd love more windows. You put a little window in, crack the window open, and the music's just kind of pouring out into the night. Not too loud, we don't want to annoy the neighbors, but like, if you came next to the church, you drove in the parking lot, the first thing you'd notice when you got out of your car was someone's worshiping. Right here, right now. Anytime you come by, someone's worshiping. I think that'd be really cool. And that's what they had. That was the ideal. That was the goal, was to have worship leaders just going around the clock. Now, if you go through the Old Testament, you won't find too many hints they were actually acting on this. You won't find too many mentions of this actually going on. There was a lot of ideals that God gave them. There was a lot of ideals that David thought of or Solomon thought of that didn't last that long, that sort of petered out and lost momentum. But there's a few times in history where Israel starts to get back on track, and they're really excited to get back on track, and they're just so in love with God, and they're so excited to do something for Him. And they start doing these kinds of things. They look at the ideal, the perfect vision of what it could be, and they go, yeah, let's do that. And they go through with it. And so that's what they're doing here, is they're listing out the old jobs that once existed, and the nation's grown since then, and now they're saying, hey, your great-great-great-grandfather was one of the 24/7 worship leaders. We'd like you to be one of them too. It's kind of a weird request, right? But think about what that entails. It means, yeah, you have a job every single day, and it's a pretty cool job. It means you got to live in the capital because you don't want the commute to be like, 36 hours long. You want to just be able to walk to the temple. But your job is to just go sing before the Lord. I like it. I think that's really cool. Some of the jobs, bake bread. And all you're baking bread for is the temple. That's it. You got like one customer. You only bake for the temple. That's a pretty cool job. To be the guy who's the gatekeeper and just make sure nothing wrong happens. The gates shut when they're supposed to, the gates open when they're supposed to. No one's in here messing around, stealing stuff. It's a pretty cool job. You get to guard God's special stuff. You get to guard the stuff that the entire country uses to worship Him. Pretty cool. I like it. So they're handing out these jobs, and one of the things I think you may have already noticed is these aren't priests. So every day you show up to work, you're next to the guy who other people might think of as the most important guy. Every day you show up to work, you're next to the guy, maybe the high priest, who everyone thinks is like the most holy, sacred person in the whole country. And you're just the guy who like shuts the gate at night. I think it's a pretty cool job, but in a lot of other people's minds, it might seem like your job is small. You have a tiny part. And it's not that important. I mean, anyone could open the gate, come on. Right? That's not that big a deal. Anyone can sing. Well, not everyone, but most people don't think of the worship leader down in kids ministry the same as the worship leader in the main sanctuary. The same as the worship leader up here. In our heads, there's a certain hierarchy we put on people. And we might even introduce into that some famous musician at the top of that. Someone who's got CDs and MP3s online, and everyone knows their name, and they're playing concerts all over the country. And we sort of auto-create this hierarchy of importance. But God's system of looking at people and giving them jobs is not based on how important you're going to end up. Jesus talks about it in the New Testament that to who much is given, much will be asked of them, and that if you do well with a little, God will give you even more. These two concepts are really interesting when you start to apply them to spiritual things. Some people just apply them only to money, exclusively money. And I think you can apply it to money, but there's a spiritual side to this, which is if God gives you the truth, and He gives you a job spreading that truth, then He's actually watching to see how good you do at that. He's watching to see how much of that you do. And I think it kind of applies here. If you were given the job to be the gatekeeper, and maybe you think of it as not that important, then you might slack off on your job. If you think it's not that big of a deal, you might slack off. And if you slack off, then suddenly you fail. The gate gets left open one night, some thief gets in, something gets stolen. Suddenly, how important was your job? It's way important. It became more important the less you respected it. Because there was a missed opportunity there. And this is how it is with God and His kingdom. When He gives you opportunity, suddenly your job is at maximum importance because the opportunity is right in front of you. So keep your eyes open. Watch for those moments. Sometimes they're when you least expect them, that someone needs your help, that someone reaches out for your hand, that someone asks you a question, that someone's hurting right in front of you and you have a chance. You could go help them. Those are the moments when your importance in the kingdom just grows all of a sudden. And there are other moments where it feels like you have nothing to do, there's nothing going on, I don't even know what my job in the kingdom is. There's an important moment there too, which is you can grow, you can draw close to the Lord, you can figure out what are you actually supposed to be doing. Or you can just wander off and leave your post. And suddenly your job gets way more important because you're going to start missing opportunities when you wander off, when you leave your post. All right, Carter, did you have a question?
I had a comment actually.
Go for it.
If the gatekeepers are slacking off, or they're just not there.
I mean, I'm hoping there's enough gatekeepers someone else notices. Some other gatekeeper.
But let's say nobody else does, or the other gatekeepers.
I mean, some of the stuff, if you go back to the original time when they first opened up the temple, some of the stuff was solid gold, giant objects made of all gold, or sometimes it was, even bigger things, but it was plated in gold. And when they plated something in gold, it wasn't like today. Today we dip it in chemicals and it's 1 micron of gold thick.
Yeah.
Back then when they plated something in gold, it meant you hammered out a plate of gold and you wrapped it around the thing and you nailed the gold onto the thing. So you steal that, that's still a lot of gold.
Time ago, they had so much more gold than we do.
I think there was just less people to share it with.
No.
No? Okay. Well, and also in the temple, it was a whole nation donating their gold to create that.
They use gold as currency.
Not every civilization.
No.
And at this point in time, not as much. That's a little later in history.
But once they do start using gold as currency.
Yeah.
That currency could be biodegraded into the soil or something.
So here's the funny thing about gold. It doesn't biodegrade. It's one of the main reasons it was ever chosen as a precious metal to be used as currency. It doesn't tarnish on its own because it's so inert. You know how iron rusts? Silver does a similar thing, it patinas. And it's usually whatever the metal is plus oxygen is usually what it is. You add oxygen to the metal and it turns a bad color, starts actually growing that layer on the outside and eating away the metal. Gold doesn't do that. But gold will lose 1 atom every few hundred years. It's insane. You leave gold in a basement, it will be the same when you come back 1,000 years later. It's not going to change any. And water doesn't affect it, and oxygen doesn't affect it, it just sits there. And it's one of the only materials that does that. So that's, I think, one of the #1 reasons people liked it. They noticed you let your silver sit there, you let your gold sit there, you let your copper sit there, you let your bronze sit there, and all of them tarnish except for the gold. You polished it 100 years ago, it's still going to look, well, maybe dusty, but pretty dang polished 100 years later. So, yeah, gold's weird like that.
Wait, not the gate.
Yeah, you're just going to walk off with it.
There's just so much that can be
Yeah,
stolen.
and when the temple's bustling and everyone's there, you're going to notice when the gatekeeper's missing. But this is all fresh. This is all new. These are people having their jobs for the first time. Also, there's no temple yet. They got to rebuild the temple first. And I'm betting, as we keep reading, we're going to start to see some of these guys jumping in. The ones that are going to get named, where you find out their first name, they're all going to have these big roles to play in building the wall, building the temple, doing all this stuff. But we got a ways to go because Chronicles is getting us up to the present, and then it's going to leap back into the past again. And then we're going to slowly work our way back. Because it's a history book, and for them, every time you jump to the present, it was simpler. Because their present was their present. For us, it's just 2 periods in history. So for us, it's confusing because we're reading about this many years ago and this many years ago, this many years ago, this many years ago. For them, it's like reading your history book today, and your history book says, and now, and it's talking about now. So for them, it was easy peasy. It was past and present, past and present. Does that make sense? For us, it's like, what did I say? 450 BC, 1000 BC. 450 BC, 1000 BC.
Yeah.
So for us, it's a little more confusing. But yeah, for them, it was just past, present, past, present, past, present. So, all right, yeah,
When
Anthony.
you said a few hundred, did you mean over 1,000?
For gold, is that what we're talking about?
No.
What are we talking about?
For the name.
For the names, it depends on how you count. That's your only hint.
I count every.
Your only hint. If you count every name and you don't consider double ups, it's over 1,000.
Okay, yeah, so.
If you count every name and you consider that Judah said twice is just 1 count, Judah said 3 times is just 1 count, then that's going to be less than 1,000. But it's
Yeah.
on either side of 1,000.
Okay, I'm doing it.
Yeah, it's a lot.
I'm already at 6.
Okay,
I got it right.
I think we're almost done here. I think I've got a quote for you guys. Yeah, this one comes from Isaiah. I love Isaiah. Isaiah, when God's the one speaking, has so much character and attitude. This is God at an interesting moment. It's right during this whole transition out to punishment. Okay? So they're just getting ready to leave for punishment. They've already been warned countless times, and God is not only revealing the details of the punishment that's going to befall them, but also the rescue plan. So he does both at once, because he doesn't want to worry them like, I'm forsaking you, I'm done with you. He doesn't want them to think that. So he's giving them both the punishment and the rescue plan in the same book. And he does this in a few of the other prophets too. But in Isaiah, you start to get to how the Messiah comes into that picture, how Jesus comes into that picture. And you get verses like this. And it just tickles me to hear God talk like this, because you sort of get the idea that, like, God, although he's not human, we get all of our attributes from him in some way. And so there is a part of us, when we see wrongness happen, we get energized by the desire for justice. Now, for us, sometimes it edges into sin, and we start to move towards revenge. That's not good. But God is not that way, and so when he gets energized for justice, you just see God coming alive with this energy, this excitement of, we're going to fix this stuff. It is going to be good again, okay? So here's what God says through Isaiah. But forget all that. It is nothing compared to what I am going to do, for I am about to do something new. See, I have already begun. Do you not see it? I will make a pathway through the wilderness. I will create rivers in the dry wasteland. So this kicks off this whole series of chapters until you get all the way up to Isaiah 53, where we're talking about how Jesus is going to accomplish what God wants to accomplish, and how Israel couldn't quite do it. There was all these chances where they could be his chosen people in this really full sense, but he knew they were going to fail. And it was going to take a mediator, a perfect person to stand in between the perfection of God and the humanity that we're all stuck with, to really bridge that gap and to lead us properly. We can't really do it on our own. And Israel had been trying and failing for hundreds of years. And Jesus comes along, and he not only forgives people of their sin, that is huge, but that is essentially the opening of the door, because what comes next is just as important. He fills us with his Holy Spirit. And this is so transformative, because that means that now we're not just a human. Now we live with God in us. That's not the case before we're a Christian. That's not the case before we have our forgiveness from Christ. We don't live as humans with God in us. That doesn't happen until then. And so now he's going to be able to put life into dead things. Do you see the imagery there? A pathway through the wilderness, rivers in the dry wasteland. That's how the Spirit is to us. The Spirit is life-giving water. It refreshes us. It keeps us going. And in a desert, that's life. That is the difference between life and death. It's not just like a slightly better thing. It's the opposite of dying. You needed to stay alive. And so he gives them the whole genealogy. He gives them all the land back. And then he gives them the offer. All right, guys, make me a temple. Worship again. Put me first. Show me you can do it. And you know what they do on the first try? They see that it's hard, and they give up. And they say, I'm just going to go build my house. I don't want to work on the temple. It's so stinking hard. I don't want to do the wall. It's so much. I just want to build my house. And they give up on the first try. After they've been in, bondage and slavery and been kidnapped a country away for 70 years, they get their first try and they're like, oh, I don't know, God, it seems too much.
I'll just bring you to slavery again.
He could have. Oh my gosh, he could have. That would have been like the worst kind of irony. But instead, he just sends them prophets and priests that are going to whip them back into shape and just say, wake up, guys. Wake up. And on try number 2, they do get it. And it is hard. Like, it's harder than they even thought it was going to be hard. They thought it was just going to be hard because, it's a big job. But it ends up being hard, like, all of the locals that have moved in the last 70 years are now attacking you because they don't want you to have a temple. They don't want you to have a city. They don't want you to have walls. It gets way hard. And it takes them years and years and years to actually finish the project. But God says, I got something spiritual for you. I've got something bigger for you. And it involves me living with you. You guys know around Christmas time we sing all these songs about Jesus being born in a manger. One of them, you probably heard, it calls him Emmanuel. And that comes from the Bible. That's not from a song, but that's usually where we hear it. We hear it. Emmanuel, Emmanuel. No? No one?
No.
No? Okay, that's a My Era song. What's the older one?
I know
Older
it.
Christmas song, Emmanuel.
What's a blue slash? Just like across.
Artistic.
You don't have to know every single project.
I know, because I'm not that good of an artist, so I just reused it.
Would you like some help?
I made it a different color. It was white last time.
Would you like some help?
No, it's okay.
You changed the color of that thing.
It was white last time, don't remember?
Yeah, I remember.
Oh.
wasn't here.
Last week it was blue too.
Oh, last week, yeah, because it's per book. I don't change it every week. That's too much. I can't handle that. I need some thematic attachment between like each chapter in the
How
book.
will you change it every day?
I'm running out of colors. All right, so
Just stop doing slash.
God's work in Israel has a point, but it was never going to reach the end goal on its own. Israel was never going to be the way and the place that God lived with his people fully in a complete sense. It was the way he got to the way that he could live with his people in a full and a complete sense. Does that make sense? They're not the end goal. He's their chosen people to bring about the end goal. The end goal was Jesus. And through Jesus, we get everything else. Through him, we have access to the Father. Through him, we get to live with God. Hand in hand, a shared life. And so what he shows us here is that you can work in this grander team, in this bigger picture, and you can have a job that maybe on its own doesn't seem that big of a deal. But in the picture, it makes up for it. Because in the picture, everything happens. And that's how it is for us in his kingdom. We may not always get the biggest job we can imagine. We may not always get the job we even ask for. But if we are working in his kingdom, we make such a big impact by being part of that kingdom that it is the most important job in the world. There's no job more important than the one that God gives you. He could literally give you the job to mop floors. And it could be ultimately important because of how he uses it in his kingdom. He could give you the job of scooping up dog poop.
I did.
Job working at GameStop.
There were some jobs I did not thoroughly enjoy growing up that God used in his kingdom. We did this one mission trip down to Mexico, and we were just trying to build like a room onto someone's church so they could have more space and they could do a kids ministry. And so we used their kitchen shared eating area to do a VBS to like kind of show them, hey, here's how a VBS could look. You guys can do something like this. Very limited supplies, very limited craft objects down in Mexico for the money they had. So we brought them a bunch and like left them with extra. And while we're doing that in the kitchen, we have a different team on the back of the church building them like a permanent children's ministry room. So there's just like space for the kids. So when the adults meet, you can like talk about Bible stuff, and if the kids get bored, you can go do kid stuff. And you can tell them about Jesus back in the kids' room. But they didn't have one, so we were building that, we were doing drywall, and I hated it, because I was this skinny little middle schooler. I had like no meat on these bones. I still don't have much, but I had even less then. And we're doing like drywall. And they're like, okay, Daniel, get the next sheet of drywall. And I'm like, you've got to be joking. And like, you guys ever tried to move a sheet of drywall? Like a 4x8 of drywall?
Oh, yeah.
It's like these walls are 8 feet tall. Okay, so that tall and then 4 feet wide, which is like my span.
I do that all
you
the
know.
time.
And I was in middle school. And they're like, okay, bring it in. Okay, I need a hole cut right there, Daniel, go. I'm like, how do you cut a hole in drywall? No one even taught me that. I don't know how to do that. And we get done. I'm tired. I'm dirty. There are no showers. Showers do not exist in this town. There's no showers
So
whatsoever.
everybody just.
And we go sleep in this upper room in someone's house, and like the water they had was collected in rain barrels. They didn't have any like water company piping water into them. Like it was rain barrels. So you weren't going to sacrifice that water to a shower. There's no way. That's like all the water you have until it rains again. So we're sleeping in this upper room, and we have these things, they called them no-see-ums. You guys ever met a no-see-um?
No.
It's basically, it's dark and it's a little bug that bites you and you can't tell what it is. You couldn't see it, so it's a no-see-um. I don't actually know what it was. Probably just fleas. I don't know. But they're just biting us the whole stinking night, just all up and down our bodies. We start like crawling inside of our sleeping bags in the Mexico night heat and like cinching the top shut. Some of us didn't have cinches. Some of us were like trying to roll the top down from inside the bag. Like, please don't get in here. Please don't get in here. Itch, itch, itch. And wake up the next day. All right, Daniel, give me that sheet of drywall.
Daniel, moving drywall.
And then we go, and the next day we're at some other place, a different church down in Mexico, and we're like laying bricks. I don't know how to lay bricks. So like, Daniel, you suck at laying bricks. You're the worst. Just carry the bricks. You can't lay bricks. Just carry bricks. I'm like, I have to carry bricks. I don't like mission trips anymore. And that's all I did all day. Just carry cinder blocks. You know, those ones. Just back and forth. Back and
Daniel,
forth, back and forth.
why do you find all this stuff so hard? It's easy.
I was tiny.
I'm tinier than you were, I bet money. And I do it all the
Okay,
time.
well, Anthony,
Go pick up
I didn't
that
pick up rock climbing for years after that. Basically, the most athletic thing I ever did was play with yo-yos. Okay, so, you know, like I joined the basketball team because my dad wanted me to play a sport, and we designed our team plays around the fact that Daniel should never touch the ball. That was the actual play. Like you've got all the lines, you know, like the X's and the O's, and like the pass here, pass there. This guy's at the top of the key. Daniel, you're gonna be over here. I want you to distract that guy. Cool. All right. Good. Go team. Like I was not athletic. I was the opposite of athletic, and
then you picked it.
I didn't enjoy the work of that mission trip, to put it lightly. But eventually, we got to run the VBS with the kids. Oh, I loved that. Except I didn't speak any Spanish. So I was mostly just like, you guys are adorable. And then we'll do crafts and I'll show them how to do crafts. And then it's like Bible lesson time and the teacher starts speaking in Spanish so they can all understand. And I'm just like, cool, cool. Yeah, don't hit your friend. Okay, yeah, cool. And like, they don't know what I'm saying. They don't speak English. So I had a good time with that part. And then years later, we went back, we did another mission trip when I was in high school. And we did a lot of the same. Move cinder blocks, build retaining walls, put drywall up. It was a totally different place. But then we also had all these orphans to look after too. We got to help out with the orphans. And the orphans there were a particular category of orphan. These were not orphans whose parents passed away, who, you know, their parents died in a car crash, you know, like anything like that. These were orphans specifically whose parents said, I don't want you. And very specifically, because you have a birth defect. Exclusively. So it's just an orphanage of kids that have some birth defect. And it could be anything from cognitive, like you just can't process right, you're on the autism spectrum, to your face has a different shape to it.
Like a slight,
No, they were all pretty substantial. Like you know, they had, some of them had different kinds of palsy, some had joint problems where they couldn't walk. You can go look it up. It's a big category of different birth defects. But it was all obvious. Like none of the kids, you would walk up to even one of them and go like, oh, you look rather normal. Why are you here? It was all plain with every single kid. Ah, you're here because you're in a wheelchair and your parents couldn't afford a wheelchair. Ah, you're here because you're blind. Ah, you're here because literally one eye is like 2 inches above the other.
What?
And don't laugh. Like that's their life. That's how they have to live. You know, they can't fix that. They can't change that. And these kids are just thrown out of their homes as like a baby because of whatever was different about them. And some of those moments with those kids were some of the most rewarding moments of my life. To just get to put a smile on their face and just to get to play with them. But some of those moments were really hard. There were kids there that were so different in the head that they couldn't speak. They couldn't process what you were saying to them. So speech was just like something beyond them. They could not handle speech at all in either direction. And one of them was like older than me. He's in like his late 20s at the time, and he can't talk and he can't leave his wheelchair. And he doesn't have the neural control to move his arms at will. Something went so wrong in like the brain stem that his arm muscles are just in a permanent pull-tight state. He can't ever straighten them out of his own free will. They're just constantly up. And so when he's in his wheelchair, it's not punishment, it's not discipline. They strap his arms down. And that's like how he holds himself up. And so his back muscles are in constant reverse, so he doesn't pull himself down in his chair. And he lives his entire life in constant weightlift mode. And it presented a real challenge, because at some point you got to get this guy dressed in the morning. And you get him out of bed, and he's like this in bed, and you got to get pants on him and put a shirt on him. And then you got to put him in the chair, and he wants to help you. He's such a lovely guy on the inside, but he can't talk to you and he can't put his arms down. And like, that's some of the work I got to go do, and it was really hard. It wasn't very rewarding in the moment, because in the moment you're just struggling. You're just fighting through, how do you put a shirt on a person who's bigger and stronger than you and can't help you? But God gave us that job for that moment. And so we just helped each other. We'd get 2 and 3 people to get this guy dressed and to put him in his chair and get him out to mealtime. And then you get to feed him. Because he can't. I don't know if you can really picture that in your head. Like if you were born in such a state that if people did not put food in your mouth, you would die. Oh wait. That's how we're all born.
Oh.
But then years go by, and it's still the case, and it's still the case, and it's still the case. And this is the craziest part. He can't talk, he can't process speech, but we go to chapel, and someone's teaching the Bible, and when the singing happens, and everyone's worshiping God in Spanish, and I can barely keep up, because I'm just trying to sound out the Spanish words up there, he's in the back. He's smiling, and for as much as he can, he's singing. You know what I mean? Like, he can't make out the words. He can't actually enunciate and get his tongue to do what he wants. But he is pushing out his own beautiful sound out of his throat. And so in God's kingdom, I want you to understand, the job I want you to focus on here is not the one I had. It's his. He had a job in God's kingdom. Isn't that interesting? His job in God's kingdom was to take a high schooler like me and say, whoosh, you've got it pretty good, you dummy. It's to say, you don't know how lowly of a job I could give you. You don't know how hard it can be. And no youth pastor, no person that I knew back here in the States could have explained to me as well as this man who can't leave his own chair, get himself dressed, or talk. Does that make sense? His job in God's kingdom was to take high schoolers and go, wake up. And he was really good at his job. And that was the job God gave him. And I don't know how hard it was for him. I don't know how many days he woke up and just went, God, is it over yet? Do I get to go home yet? I don't know how many days he got that feeling inside. I don't know how many days he woke up and he was excited. I wonder what team's going to be here this week. I don't know, because he can't tell me. But that's the job God gave him. And when he gets to heaven, he's not going to be rewarded based on, how many people he reached with the gospel. He's not going to be based on that. He's going to be based on how faithful to God he was. And from what I could see during chapel time, he was faithful. Does that make sense? So when I say gatekeeper, when I say mop the floors, I want you to understand, I'm not listing out like the lowest jobs. I'm just giving you some examples. There are lower and more humble jobs than that. And God can use any one of those jobs, and he can give you any one of those jobs. And sometimes it's for a season, Sometimes it's for your whole life. He could make you president of the United States. I don't know. Any job on the totem pole. Anything, all the way up or down. But when he gives you that job, take it. Take it and do that job with your whole heart, with everything you've got. Right now, likely the job you have is as simple as reach the kids I know who don't know Jesus. It's that simple. It's not easy, but it's simple. But you might have more than that. I know some of you, and I know some of you have more than that as your job right now. Some of you I don't know quite so well, and so maybe I don't know the other jobs you have. But the jobs God gives are not always these paid vocations where you go and you get a paycheck from your boss. A lot of the jobs that God gives are the ones where you're just in the right place doing the thing God would have you do. And that is a job. And when he sees you doing your job, then he gets to say about you, do you not see it? I'm doing something great. It's already started. And he's talking about you. He got to say this about Jesus because he knew Jesus was going to be faithful. Jesus was going to fulfill the role that God had given, that he was going to come to the earth, he was going to live a perfect life, be the perfect example, and then die on the cross in our place. But he could also say this about you. And it all just hinges on, are you going to step up? Or are you going to do what he hands you? Be the gatekeeper. Be the loaf baker. Be the one who guards the incense so the other guy can burn it. Be the person who does that one small job that God gives you and be faithful in that job. And God's not just going to reward you in heaven, he's going to reward you here with blessing. And then there'll be honor in heaven. I can't wait to see him again, that kid from Mexico. I never did learn his name properly. Everyone's name is in Spanish, and I'm bad at Spanish. I think I remember one of the little girl's names. She stole my hat. She's adorable. I still have her picture. She had like 3 teeth. She's so cute, though.
Did she keep your hat?
No, she gave back eventually. But like, she ran away with it. She thought it was hilarious. Because I have a big head, and so it went on her head like this.
Every kid
was
wants to steal hats.
That's true. It's pretty universal. Losing my place here. Let's pray. That's as good as an ending as any.
Forgetting my place.
Lord, we ask that you would grant us that vision where we get to see what our job is in your kingdom. I know you don't always give us clarity on how important it is or what all of the after effects will be. And that's all right, Lord. We understand you're in charge and we're not. But we do ask that you would just reveal to us what the job is. I know so many of us are unsure. We're unclear. And we like to know things for certain, Lord. And so as much as you are willing, we would ask that you would just reveal it to us. You'd give us that direction. Guide us through our parents, through our family, through other people here at the church. Help us to have a really good idea of where it is you're taking us and what it is we're supposed to be doing. And Lord, protect us from that pride of I'm good at my job, or that pride of I have an important job, or that pride of, I got to pick my job. Keep us humble in all those situations, Lord, where you lift us up. And Lord, help us to understand that we're working for you whenever you give us those humble jobs. That it's worth it because it's part of your kingdom. And we pray, Lord, that we would have an effect. That you would empower us through your Spirit. That we would rely on you enough that when these opportunities present themselves, we would respond in obedience. We would react with faith and not fear. Selflessness and not selfishness. Help us, Lord, to have an effect in our friend groups. That we would be leading them closer to you, gently, subtly at first, Lord, but also as we find those opportunities, Lord, just help us to make big moves as we pour out your truth before our friends. Help us to be good ambassadors where we can just introduce them to you. with our heads bowed, with our eyes closed, if there's someone here today that has not been introduced to Jesus and you want to make that big step right now, where you say, Jesus, I'm going to live my whole life for you. I want your forgiveness. I want your acceptance. I put my faith in you. Please forgive me. I'm going to put that offer out on the table right now because he already did it. He's put that offer out for all of you. He wants to adopt you into his family. He said that it starts with you just placing your faith in him, believing in who he is, what he did, trusting him. The Bible says that if you'll put your faith in him, you'll repent of your sins, then you can be forgiven, washed clean, be given eternal life, and brought into the family of God. So if that's you right now, you want that, I just ask you to raise up your hand, and I'll pray with you. I'll help you out with the words. But you can talk to him. You can ask for those things. You can tell him those things. Anyone this morning, just lift up your hand, and I'll pray with you. Lord, I thank you for these middle schoolers. Bless them this week as they go out. Some of them back to school, some of them just doing homeschool, Lord, but wherever they're going to be at, bless them. Fill them with your Spirit. Work through them. Show them those jobs you have for them. We pray that in your name, Jesus. Amen. I love you guys. I was planning on doing topic nights this month. We'll see. We'll see. It's going to be a little hectic in my personal life for a few months. The house building is coming to a head, and Emily's due in November. So it may be a bit much to do an extra night a week. We'll see. If it's not this month or October, then we'll pick it up in November. Or the other one, half November, half December. We'll see.
Can you do the phone bucket? Wait. Before you do the phone bucket, can I make phone? Can I do topic night?
That depends on if all the high schoolers are going to topic night.
What do you mean?
I was going to invite Jared along.
And then I started laughing.
Why is your phone?
If I said that, I would have been dead.
Yeah, Dad. I know your mom.
It's just like different for each kid. Like,
Is the 12th generation?
yeah, you can say whatever you want.
Oh, numbers?
Yeah, but he's like, Moses!
They'll counting and it looks like it.
It might be.
But I don't know if it's
Logan.
13th or 11th.
Yeah, so after that was 10.
Wait, what?
I guess he's the nut.
Whose
so
phone?
you, like,
Oh, that's
count
mine.
out of it.
Why is there a quarter?
Why do you have my?
Oh, you want?
Oh,
Alan,
He was
you
just
always win,
I was just waiting to see who the owner was. I looked at all the notifications. I couldn't figure it out.
oh yeah, that's just random stuff. So,
Yeah, none of it was like, hey, Alan. So I didn't.
Hey,
Hello,
Alan,
Alan
don't put the phone bucket
Gonzalez.
this time, like,
It worked. Oh, we're in the background.
Yeah.
Okay. I should have figured that out.
You didn't analyze the photo?
When did someone sneak my coffee up here?
It's been there the whole time.
Did she really?
yeah, she
Oh man, I was deep in it.
You took it from her too.
Did I really?
You took it right out.
Yeah, you.
Oh,
My
that's
ribs
weird.
are sore, so hold on.
Now you're like,
My
what else?
brain.
What else did she do?
I have a real one-track brain. Wow. Thank you guys for stacking chairs.
I don't.